Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening from wherever you're logged in. Uh, I'm Arjun Mishra. I'm the host of the Unnati podcast series, which is a series dedicated towards CSR practitioners and luminaries who have been at the forefront of creating a better and a more diverse and a more inclusive workplace for people with disabilities, the LGBT community, and the underrepresented. It's a great honor today to host Mr. Rajiv Sharma, who has been a mentor to me. He's been at the forefront of creating a more diverse workplace, creating opportunities for the employment for the differently abled, and he has been the guiding light in this mission. I have the honor today to interview him. And via this podcast, we wanted to, the intent is to dispel myths around diversity and inclusion, speak about the challenges which individuals and corporates are facing towards creating a diverse workforce, whilst most have the intent towards it. Uh, Before we start, Rajiv, sir, if for the audience, a warm welcome to you. And if for the audience, you could
Thank you.
give a little brief introduction about yourself and a
Sure.
little more about uh, your how you associated with the cause and how you've been working towards diversity and inclusion, sir, if possible.
Sure. Thanks, Arjun. Pleasure's all mine to join you for this podcast. I've been a thoroughbred human resource professional with over about 23, 24 years of experience. And as a part of my HR experience, I've realized that uh, integrating people from the underrepresented categories is an important component of your talent strategy. It not only helps
Right.
you building your culture, but it also helps you essentially to make sure that you're giving back to the community that you work from or that you take from. Uh,
Correct.
additionally, uh, in the last couple of years, especially during COVID, what I've realized that the business
Right.
case for diversity and inclusion has become far more important. Uh, you know, COVID saw many of COVID saw COVID saw that many of the underrepresented population sections of population were thoroughly impacted. And hence it becomes so important for us to integrate those sections of the community to the workforce. So I think that's been a little bit of my experience. Most recently, I've been working with Aristocrat India. I've been working with Aristocrat. I led their human resource team for about 3 years, and then have taken up an international assignment, and I'm currently based in the U.S.
Thank you. Thank you, Rajiv, sir. Um, so, with your experience, and that's something which we generally have come to see, that is that in spite of having the intent, many organizations are struggling uh, with with creating a more inclusive and a more diverse culture. Uh, Many companies want to foster a culture where we have a diverse populace of employees, but then there are questions around, whether the business mandate or whether productivity uh, would get compromised if if we have people from, say, the disabled community as part of the workforce, and that becomes difficult to sell across to the management at times. So, with your experience, how have you, because you've been at the forefront, and I understand that you have been leading the mission towards creating a more diverse workplace across organizations. Have you faced the challenges, and how? What is your take, and how can we impress upon the management the need for having a more diverse workforce,
Sure.
and
Yeah,
counter the
Arjun, I
question
think there
around
is,
productivity and performance?
yeah, there is no easy answer to this. I think it comes with experience,
Okay.
primarily because it's a fear of unknown. If you look at it from a hiring manager perspective, their biggest fear is, will my productivity get compromised? What they're not
Correct.
understanding is that the uh, a diverse workforce would lead to better decisions, would lead to better outcomes. Many of us are only concerned about, will my productivity get compromised? So unless you, so there has to be a two-pronged approach. It has to be a top-down and a bottom-up approach, essentially to overcome this problem. So, for example, more and more companies want a diverse workforce, because ultimately a diverse
Right.
workforce is representative of their customer base. And if their customers are diverse, they should have a diverse workforce so that they can
Correct.
solve multitude of problems. Then I think when you
Correct.
once you've realized that okay, yes, we need diverse workforce, and you've started finding out channels through which you'll get them, the next big problem is how do you integrate
Right.
this diverse workforce, because the organization may be philosophically ready to get these people in, but maybe the infrastructure is not in place. Maybe they do not have the right set
Makes
of
sense.
policies and processes to integrate it. And if these people are not integrated right, then obviously they will be, they will not have a great employee experience. And as a result, they may not be
Correct.
as successful as you would want them to be successful. So ultimately, it has to be a multitude of factors. There has to be awareness, there has to be policies that support integration, and then finally, there has to be a need for inclusion at the grassroots level to make sure that employees have a great experience
Hmm.
working alongside. And I believe organizations, instead of starting with a big bang approach, they can start small. They can test it out in a few teams. And
Right.
once they have good experiences, they can use those as strong brand ambassadors to integrate more and more people, more and more diverse people, and more underrepresented people from the underrepresented community into the workforce. That's how I think about it.
No, absolutely, sir, and I resonate his thoughts. The second problem I feel that something which is common is that uh, that it involves a lot of planning which has to go around, because it's just not about providing positions. It's also around the trajectory and how's the career growth panned out for those individuals who you have hired into the organizations. Uh, where is the
Yeah.
future? How do we foresee the next 5 years for them? Um, what is the challenges which we may be facing? Your thoughts around that, sir? That because yes, we would want them to be as much as a part of, and as we would consider normal, a differently abled or other employees, but there still comes certain challenges in a combination of administrative roles or a combination of other systemic challenges which may be involved. How do we
Yeah.
address the future approach?
See, as long as you're aligned with what the end outcome looks like, I believe that all the other challenges that you highlighted, Arjun, are still solvable. If the
Okay.
organization, the leadership team, and the culture is aligned on what the end outcome looks like. And the end outcome looks like making sure that I have representation from all underrepresented categories of workforce in my workforce. I think that's the end outcome. Yes, there needs to be somebody who's going to
Right.
work on the training and development program of people which that come from different parts of the community. Now, people may have learning disability. People may have visual disability. People may have audio disability. So, are your learning programs, making sure that they're able to cater to a variety of people with disabilities? The second piece of that is then is your IT infrastructure, is your building infrastructure capable of embracing all these forms of disability? Are they accessible, not only physically accessible, but let's say, do you have braille? Do you have systems that really allow for people with visual disability to access your
Right.
systems? So yes, it is definitely, a long and arduous task. But I feel that as long as you're aligned to what the end outcome is, the organizations can definitely take steps to make sure that they're solving these problems as they're going along.
Right. And that brings me to the next point, sir, that suppose there's an organization which has adopted a culture of inclusion. What matrices or what uh, calibrations can be done that we are moving up the value chain? And are they, for example, okay, so the first level, maybe we have a talent pool of, say, I'm just giving an arbitrary example. Let's say an organization hires 10 individuals. Um, what are those matrices which can be set in place, which can progressively map the diversity journey, or which can celebrate that, okay, so we have now, the first level was that we have included them in our organization. What is the next step?
Yeah.
which makes us move up the value chain for diversity. That's one. And does some shining examples come to your mind around champions of diversity and inclusion and the positive impact that they have delivered in their organization?
Sure. Sure. So I think let's just take a step back, right? Even from how many numbers we have hired, let's just take a step back to
Right.
how many numbers have we been able to attract. You know, how many
Hmm.
organizations right now look at their talent pool slate? Basically, if I'm opening up a position, let's say I'm opening up a software developer position, and there are 100 people who apply for it, am I doing the analysis of those 100 people? Where are they coming from? How many men applied? How many women applied? How many people who are gender neutral applied? Are there people
Correct.
who have disability who applied? So just having a talent pool analysis of what your talent state looks like, throws up some very interesting metrics. Secondly, just look at,
Hmm.
if you pick up any job today, and if you pick up a job description today, is the job description, the way it is worded and the way it is written, is it excluding people or is it including people? If I continue to use
Makes sense.
pronouns as he, him, his in the job description, I'm actually excluding the women to work to apply for it, because they may feel that this is a very largely male-dominated job description that's been written. So I think it has
Correct.
to be systemic, like you mentioned, Arjun. So I think that's where it begins. Then answering your second question
Hmm.
around what should the matrix look like, I think it has to begin from that, and then it has to take on to places like doing a demographic analysis of your employees, and demographic not only in terms of not only in terms of your gender and age, but other diversity markers as well. Capturing that information, I think
Hmm.
today most of the organizations are not even capturing that information around, hey, do I have people from the LGBTQ? Are there people who are disabled? Now, one,
Hmm.
organizations sometimes shy away from asking for that information because they feel that it's too personal an information.
Correct.
Secondly, if they're not asked, employees also do
Hmm.
not share. Now, I hope
Hmm.
we come to a point where we make it voluntary for people. If you look at any HCM system today, any employee system today, there are capabilities of capturing that information on a voluntary basis. Let's begin from that. Let's first define what a baseline is.
Correct.
The metric comes secondly.
Hmm.
I don't think we even have a very good baseline for organizations at the moment. Uh,
Hmm.
some of the some examples that come to my mind, around diversity and inclusion are without naming the companies, but I've seen that many companies ask this information right at the time
Hmm.
of once your resume is being sent or when you're applying for a particular position, because they want to keep track
Hmm.
of how am I able to attract a diverse talent pool or not, because that's how they want to start tracking it. Then they go on to track how many people are getting selected. Then they are trying to track what is my top talent profile looking like. How many what is my promotion profile looking like? Then
Hmm.
what is my comp equity analysis saying?
Makes
Am I
sense.
paying more to my men, more to my women, and all of that category? All of that, I believe, Arjun, can be
Hmm.
defined once your baseline is right. I think most of the organizations are not investing enough to
Makes sense.
define what their baseline is at the moment. The moment you do start doing that, once once you have a
Hmm.
solid baseline, you can come up with matrix around what you want to improve and how you want to improve.
Perfect, sir. Thank you so much. Uh, so now I'm taking the question towards the post-hiring situation. It
Sure.
takes a lot of challenge around finding the right talent, and then
Hmm.
uh, there are some unconscious biases which may be there
Yep.
in the employee base, which could be a reason for people to not be as productive as they would have been, or quitting on the organization, going beyond.
Hmm.
Which means that there is a need to also address and create greater awareness amongst the employee base on A, uh, why is diversity important at the first place, and B, what unconscious statements or or thoughts which may be spoken maybe never with the wrong intent, but can create a situation which may make a person feel offended, or at worst, you know, stop working at that organization or quit on that organization.
Yeah.
And let's speaking specifically in the case of India, inclusion as of now, uh, it's we are still way behind as we may want to be, or where maybe the West is. So how can we address that deficit of awareness amongst the employees, and how do we do it consciously so that uh, uh, we also ensure that the culture is intact. We also ensure that everyone feels that they are represented uh, without uh, you know without addressing the larger problem about uh, the problem around productivity, the problem around how we are as competitive in our new workforce. So how do we move to this problem? How do we solve that problem?
Sure, Arjun. I think like they say, it takes a village to raise a child. It also takes a village for an employee to become become inclusive. So I believe a lot of it becomes easier where you've had good parenting.
Hmm.
But obviously we cannot, that's something that organizations cannot
Right.
control. But let's just move on to once they've hired people, how can they set the tone for inclusion? I think it has to come from the top. It has to come from the top that, hey, inclusion is important, not only because it's feels the right thing to do, but it is the thing to do because ultimately it is giving us better business outcomes. And I believe that you know before we take the leap of faith of hiring such people, the organizations need to look inward to make sure that their infrastructure is ready for it. And when I
Right.
say infrastructure, not
Right.
just talking about the physical infrastructure, I'm talking about the mindset, I'm talking about the culture, I'm talking about the values. Uh, I think there are
Hmm.
many companies who do a great job of in making sure that there is a value, a company value assigned to diversity and
Hmm.
inclusion. Like for us at Aristocrat India,
Hmm.
there is uh, something called Talent Unleashed. The value primarily talks about making sure are we able to unleash the talent of all the people that we are able to hire and attract at Aristocrat. I believe that's where you
Right.
set the tone for your culture. Once you've set the tone for your
Hmm.
culture, I think the organizations can do a variety of things to make sure that they're able to integrate people from different communities and underrepresented sections of the communities in the workforce, including making sure I mean, ultimately, how many organizations today talk about microaggressions? You spoke about they sometimes end up making comments which may not be intentional, but those are biases that
Yeah.
exist. Ultimately, we are all a function of our upbringing and our upbringing and what we have experienced. Now, it is basically how do I really expand that
Correct.
scope to include that there is another way of being that also exists. Now, many organizations,
Hmm.
like we talk about communication skills, we talk about leadership, we talk about people management. I believe organizations also need to invest about microaggressions, which
Hmm.
are unintentional statements, but they end up excluding people. And then eventually, I
Right.
believe there has to be an important metric around engagement and emotional commitment that either the CEO or the head of the organization need to be accountable for to make sure that they're able to make this commitment intentional and visible to their employees. Because ultimately, I'm a firm believer, everything that gets measured gets delivered. And if you're measuring it, if you're
Correct.
talking about it, if you're making it intentional, then in all likelihood,
Hmm.
you'll be able to deliver on that particular metric. Yeah, that's how I see.
No, absolutely right. So, and I also read about how companies are in the performance, indicators, which could be a basis for promotion of employees, are also now
Yeah.
measuring how actively are they participating towards various initiatives to which the commitments of the companies is engaged. So, for example, if it's a CSR initiative towards creation of a diverse workforce, companies measure the participation, which becomes a basis for promotion or demotion of an employee. Uh, and
Yeah.
I think what sets apart is then that that individuals understand the importance of them going beyond just their expected work for which they are hired, and how it's important for them to also uh, ensure for their own self success in the organization, ensure with the larger
Yeah.
audience, and that then creates a cultural shift, and perhaps then also addresses the possibilities of you know uh, of having the wrong communications or the wrong questions being asked at times, and people are more
Yeah.
mindful about those thoughts coming to them. So I think
Yeah.
that's where
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. And
organizations can create change.
I think sometimes that it also it becomes equally important for organizations to proactively talk about it and then proactively coach people where they have noticed that these
Hmm.
microaggressions are brewing. Because unless somebody tells me what I'm saying is not helping include other people, I will never understand that because that's the
Hmm.
language I've used, or how
Hmm.
that's how I've been brought up. I believe having that open, honest conversation about inclusion is an important
Hmm.
key recipe for making sure that making sure that you're able to attract an inclusive workforce. Yeah.
And so, do you believe that a person, say a person with disability, who may have
Hmm.
faced a situation, would he go ahead and report it? Because eventually he's the manager, whoever he's working under, he may be. So can you hear me? So the question around reporting. So, do you think this person would have the leverage to go ahead and complain about his leadership or the management or the manager who he reports to, and how can we create that sense of empowerment amongst the employees?
Yeah. You're right, Arjun. It is a slightly, I'd say, if the employee who you're talking about is with a disability, they sometimes end up starting feeling not adequate, and hence
Right.
it becomes slightly difficult for them to report out because there is this fear of losing the job. There is also the fear of,
Correct.
the problem lies within me. So, and then the third one is the
Hmm.
fact that will anybody listen? But I think organizations can do a variety of things to make sure that a
Correct.
culture is set where people can speak up. You know, whether it is an
Hmm.
employee
Hmm.
whistleblower, whether it is an employee complaints process or a grievance process. Ultimately, the employees need to
Hmm.
feel whether from all employees need to feel equally wanted in the company, equally respected in the company, and equally heard in the company. So I think
Correct.
there has to be a culture of speaking up. There has to be a culture of hearing back from the employees, whether you ask them to participate
Hmm.
in anonymous employee engagement surveys, whether you ask them to
Right.
raise complaints through a whistleblower. But there has to be a culture that talks about going back to the employees and hearing their voice. So that's how I would feel. But I
Exactly.
totally agree with you. It sometimes just becomes very difficult to open up because you feel that what if I lose my job?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Correct. Correct. And then being just, I think there's a flip side too, that not all reported cases may be true. So then there's a flip side to it, that we have to be also mindful of that possibility.
Of course,
uh,
of course, and
so
and
it's
I'm
about
hoping
balancing.
that the investigation processes will make sure that all complaints are investigated, and then there will always be frivolous complaints. There will always be complaints that have been there always
Hmm.
will be issues that have been complained just for the heck of it, but the organizations cannot disregard them because you don't
Right.
know what lies underneath them. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. um, And now, the most important question for the podcaster around uh, what would you suggest or advise companies on successful ways in which they can engage with organizations working in the LGBT community or working for the differently abled community? What are some successful uh, practices which could be implemented so that
Yeah.
the organizations like NAVIT and others also get the benefits of being successfully mentored and nurtured, and also the access to resources, whilst the organizations can or the businesses can also go back in terms of getting the best talents for the tasks which they have. So, what is the secret sauce to it, sir?
Yeah, well, there is no secret sauce per se, but if you look at it from an LGBTQ perspective, that's the community which I feel there is still a lot of stigma associated with it. Because it's the acceptance of that community into the main workforce has there are still bumps along the way. While there are different
Hmm.
forms of diversity that meet the eye, this one does not meet the eye.
Hmm.
So it becomes very difficult to really understand: am I able to attract the right people? Am I able to attract the people from this
Hmm.
community as well? Because not everybody. Ultimately, let's face it. Sexuality is a very personal topic, and it's a very personal information. Not everybody has come out, uh, and then
Hmm.
even in that LGBTQ spectrum, transgenders are the ones is that community which are not getting the right amount of opportunities. With There is a lot of still hatred and skepticism associated with integrating the transgender workforce. I think if while organizations can do a good job of reaching out to this community, there are many vendor partners who specialize in
Hmm.
reaching out to the community and finding out a talent pool. The other thing that what Aristocrat experienced with, or what Aristocrat did with, was tying up with a NABET so that we could do skill building for
Hmm.
people from the community. And I remember,
Hmm.
Arjun, when you and I first spoke about it, uh,
Hmm.
even you did
Hmm.
not know how to reach out to the community members, but you still went ahead
Correct.
and took that as an important
Hmm.
task, and you reached out to the community to make
Hmm.
sure that you're able to get us a
Hmm.
batch of about 15, 30
Hmm.
people who we could start training on, and
Yes, that's
and
correct.
we weren't sure whether Aristocrat will be able to take them on, or whether we'll be able to train them, make them employable.
Hmm.
Uh, but ultimately, we were very clear about the intention that we want to make sure that we're doing something which is a meaningful shift for the people of the LGBTQ
Right.
community. And I think if you can, you can reach out to, you can work with vendor partners who specialize in reaching out to the talent pool. The other piece is you can also
Hmm.
integrate. I think there is an important component of DNI and sustainability is the intersectionality. Like what we did was
Hmm.
we combined both our programs, our diversity and inclusion program, and we combined our sustainability and our community outreach program to make sure that we create a
Hmm.
talent pool where we can actually upskill people from the LGBTQ community to take up and make them more
Hmm.
employable, whether employable within Aristocrat or
Hmm.
outside Aristocrat. We said we will figure that
Correct.
out later, but let's first upskill
Hmm.
them and let's make them employable so that they are financially independent. So I think that's what I believe many organizations. That's another solution, or that's another way that organizations can integrate people from this community to the workforce.
Futuristically, sir, how do you see the CSR space changing for the better, and for the leaders of tomorrow who would be a part of Aristocrat or another organizations? What is
Yeah,
your thoughts around how true empowerment can happen, where every stakeholder feels engaged, feels rewarded for what
yeah,
they have created, and also creates a better future? So, what are your thoughts on
yeah.
what is those changes, if made, can create a better India and better global community for the underserved, which different organizations serve?
Sure. I think there are a variety of things, and the responsibility lies at both ends. Organizations on one hand, and then organizations like NABIT on the other. There has to be it is a two-way street.
Right. Hmm.
I believe that. one, corporate organizations need to understand what their sustainability goals are. They need to define them. They need to be intentional about them on what their sustainability goals are, and then they need to partner with the right organizations like NABET or any other organization where they feel that. I think one of the questions that generally corporate organizations have is my money reaching to the right people? I hope the
Right.
administrative costs are not much. So I think that's the common. Um, I'll not say fear, but that's the common question organizations have before deploying their sustainability budgets. So if organizations like NABED and other organizations that are operating in this space continue to provide a transparent view of how their funds are being utilized, what are the areas or what are the programs that they're running with, what is the ROI of each
Correct.
program, and then draw a meaningful connection between the employee at the grassroots level and the person and a beneficiary of the community outreach program at the grassroots level. If they can draw a meaningful connection between those two people, I believe most of your problem is sorted out. And then obviously making sure that the beneficiaries of the program are integrated into the day-to-day corporate events. So, for example, if you remember, in one of my previous companies, we were working with an organization called Literacy India, and we would have
Right.
students from Literacy India schools come and interact with all our employees at all our employee events. None of
Okay.
our company event was complete without Literacy India being invited, without Literacy India being talked about. So
Okay.
unless you make it the topic of your
Okay.
conversation on an ongoing basis, I believe that the integration will not be as successful. You have to make sure that the integration is successful in a meaningful and a thoughtful manner and in an intentional manner.
Right. No, absolutely. The importance of having reflection for the work done, and that being resounded amongst the leadership becomes that much important. And
Exactly.
so recently, I was part of an event which was actually uh, having a majority of NGOs who were present there.
Hmm.
And in this particular event, the common grouse which uh, these NGO partners had was that uh, there is a managerial hierarchy who we speak to, and then there is the leadership of the organization, right? So we are good in doing what we do, which is that we are good, say, suppose in the space of environment protection, or we are good in the space of disabled inclusion. But whatever efforts we do often doesn't reach the right uh, people in the organization, and it remains limited to just the people who we interact with. And then what happens is there is an issue that uh, you know the hard work for which we have put into the organization, perhaps we are bad in having it reflected or having it spoken about
Hmm.
within the organization. And because of that, it creates a prejudice that perhaps there is lack of work happening in real terms on ground. So you
Hmm.
have been at the leadership position you head the Indian chapter for Aristocrat. How can I ask this? Because this podcast is also viewed by many NGO, the leadership of many NGOs. And how
Hmm.
can this problem be resolved, or how can we attend to this issue? What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, I think slightly radical approach, but take it for whatever it's worth. I think when on a quarterly basis or when on a 6 monthly basis you have an update, a progress meeting, instead of just meeting up with the people who are managing the program, it'll be great to invite a few leaders from the company as well.
Okay.
It will be great to, while I'm sure the corporates should also do it, but I'm just right now talking from your perspective. Maybe
Right.
understanding who that leadership team is that you should reach out to, and maybe just having them come over to visit your facility to experience all the good things that either NABIT is doing or some of these CSR firms are doing, so that ultimately you are not talking to the leader in the person, you're talking to the emotion in the person. Where I'm coming from is that I'm
Makes sense.
sure a leader is a human being first, and they would definitely be deeply moved by all the good work that NABIT does, or a CSR firm does in improving the life of uh, the underrepresented communities. I think that has to happen, and it
Correct.
has to happen outside the boardroom. It cannot happen in the boardroom, because in the boardroom, you'll be using a fancy slide to share your story. They will be wearing the leadership hat, looking at the story. I think it has to happen. They need to meet you where the actual change is happening, which is at the grassroots level, at
Correct.
at where you are actually upskilling and training people. Uh, because you have to not talk to the leader, but you have to
Right.
talk to the human inside the leader. That's what I feel.
Makes sense. It makes perfect sense, and I think that that's something which we have been doing, but I'll take it up more aggressively, because often what happens is that uh, as I said, that's a general problem across organizations, that we are good at what we
Mm-hmm.
do, but when it comes to being able to portray it well, for being able to,
Yeah.
you know, put reports, or put presentations, that's not where our core strength is, and that's where sometimes we feel that we uh, lack
Yeah.
communicational strengths to it. But then, thank you,
Yeah.
sir, for the feedback. I think this would be very important, and would the people who will be hearing this would be able to implement it in their practice, for better engagement with the corporates for which they work. And with that, Rajiv sir,
Sure.
I would want to thank you for the time which you've given today, to NABIT and to also to the podcast. And I hope that the people who hear this podcast would go back more enriched about how can they up their game in the CSR space, and how can they better serve the communities who they work for.
Thanks, Arjun. Thanks for having me over. And like I said, the work that likes of NABID do will totally change the world, the face of this world, not only India, but the face of this world, because, sustainability is an important component of each business, and for each human being and each business. So, gratitude for the work that you do, Arjun. Thank you. Thanks.
Pleasure, sir. Thank you so
Bye.
much, and look forward to speaking to you soon, of
Yeah.
the call too. Thank you, sir, for your
Thank
time.
you. Bye bye.
Take care.